Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach, Taskbox, Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holliday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I'm Lisa Holliday, your host, and today we're diving into a topic every special education teacher encounters: behavior management. Managing behavior can feel like one of the toughest parts of our job, but with the right tools, you can create a classroom that's structured, supportive, and successful. Now, I know that you've probably listened to a million podcasts about behavior management. You've probably listened to it on TikTok, social media, Facebook, Instagram. It doesn't matter. You've heard this a million different ways. However, I have some specific things that I really want you to think about. And just know this: the more times you hear something, the more often you're able to do it. So even listening to this quick 10-minute episode might give you a new perspective on how to handle those trouble behaviors. Let's explore some practical strategies you can start using today. Today, guys. Now, most of you are probably listening to this on the way to work, but you can use it as soon as you get to work. Just know this: I want you to understand that behavior is communication. When a student is acting out, they're often trying to tell us something, whether it's frustration, sensory overload, or a need for attention. Anytime I have a student in my room that is wilding out and I'm like, what is going on with them? Whether, yelling at a student across the way, they have their head down, maybe they threw a chair, maybe they are banging on their lockers in the hallway, and I'm like, what is going on? Often teachers will go out and just start yelling at a student, right? You want to just say, hey, knock it off. What are you doing? You're in defense mode. I want you to take a step back and think, okay, what is this student trying to tell me? It is our job to identify that underlying need and teach replacement behaviors. That's where behavior management tools kind of come in. If you are just in reactive mode, these tools are not going to work for you. So please turn off this episode if you're not willing to step back and go, okay, what is it that they're trying to tell me? Now, every child's behavior is a function, right? Maybe it's to gain attention, whether it's negative or positive. Often it's negative. They want your attention. Maybe it's to escape a task. They're like, hell no, I'm not doing this math activity. I don't want it. It's too hard. Maybe they're trying to meet that sensory need. Maybe they could smell the lunch cooking and it's bothering them so much because it's Fish Friday or whatever. Maybe they are bouncing off the walls and they need a weighted vest to kind of bring them back down. So understanding this why is absolutely critical to choosing the right intervention and creating meaningful change, right? You have to take a step back. Oftentimes, I don't react. I'll look at the child like, what the heck is wrong with you? No, I look at them and I kind of take a step back and I have to think, okay, what is he trying to say? What is she doing right now that I'm like, okay, how can I help the student? I need you to do that today. All right, let's talk about some tried and true tools that you can implement in your classroom today, guys. The first thing I want you to do is use behavior-specific praise. I say this all of the time, but instead of saying, good job, say, oh, I love how you raised your hand before speaking, especially if this is a student who blurts out all of the time. You want to catch them just raising their hand. And you don't want to say, good job. And you don't want to just give a thumbs up across the room. Make it a point. Walk over to them and say, and whisper in their ear, I love how you just raised your hand before speaking. That is the behavior I want to see. You're doing what's right? This reinforces that desired behavior. You'll never believe how often I do this in a day, but walking around the classroom and whispering all these I love yous in their ear is exactly what I'm doing. And I can see it. Their body language change. They sit up straighter in their chair. They're like, I'm doing something right. Because oftentimes these quote unquote bad kids are always getting yelled at. They want to be praised. So take the time out and find those moments where you can give them behavior specific praise. Next is token economies. I want you to set up a system where students earn tokens for positive behaviors. So let's go back to that one kid who's blurting out all the time. And you talk to him about a new point system and you say, okay, every time you raise your hand and you don't say anything out loud and you just kind of hold it in, you're going to get a point, right? And for every 5 points, I'm going to give you, whatever it is, 5 minutes on the iPad or whatever it is that they like to, whatever their preferred activity is, right? You want to exchange those tokens or points in for rewards for like free time or preferred activities. Or my students work for coloring sheets right now. And so they constantly want me to print out anime pictures, which is free for me. So I don't care. I'm like, okay, I love this. You want to gradually increase the difficulty of earning these tokens to kind of build that endurance and long-term behavior change. So if this is a child who really cannot sit in their seat for long or use kind words, or they're just blurting out, try getting them to just raise their hand once, earn that 1 token. Then try to get them to earn 5 tokens. So maybe in a 40-minute block, they raise their hand 5 times. Let them turn in those 5 points or 5 tokens for something. All right, the next thing is visual cues and reminders. So I use these all of the time. And so many of my colleagues in the past have thought stupid visual signs like stop signs or checklists or traffic light systems to kind of communicate expectations clearly or a joke. But I'm like, literally, these are the things that kids are looking for. We as adults are always looking for visual cues and reminders, right? So using these in our classrooms, little tiny stop signs or checklists or whatever can really help with verbal instructions to kind of reinforce their understanding. All right, social stories. I want you to try to create social stories. They could be short, on the fly, for students who might need help. So say you have a student who is struggling with getting in the classroom. Like they come in off the bus, but they're in the hallway lingering forever. Try coming up with a story, and it has to be personalized. And it has to be in the I format. So you might say, make the story, I come in from the bus. I stop at my locker. I take out my books. I put my backpack. Very specific, like almost like a little checklist. Sometimes I want to talk to my friends, but I know I don't have enough time. So having these little short stories like inside their locker and you read it every day, it becomes like an internal dialogue for them, and they kind of go through those steps without needing that social story anymore. So this paired with everything else, you will see that maximum impact because this starts becoming habitual for the student. All right, let's talk about calming corners. So this can be a little bit tricky in an inclusion classroom because sometimes students move throughout the building, but having a place, a designated place where students can go to self-regulate is essential, even if it's an inclusion setting. So having a safe space that has things like fidgets or sensory bottles or noise-canceling headphones can do a lot for a student who just is not regulated. This is that sensory input that you might think is attention-seeking behavior, and you just don't know. But you also want to teach students how to use this corner effectively. So it's a tool, not a punishment. You want them to be able to use this space, and it's not fun. It can't be any more fun than what you're doing because they're going to want to go there all of the time. You just want it to be a quiet space where students can go to kind of calm down, recollect, and come right back. You also want to have a timer in there. And if they're a little bit older, they can start to really use a timer to help keep them and learn time management skills. All right, let's talk about structured routines. I want you to establish consistent routines to create that predictability and security in the classroom. It's a little bit more difficult once you get into middle school and high school because the students travel so often. That's why you'll see a lot of students who move from elementary to middle school, And they fall apart in September, October, November because they're not used to changing. Their routines are so upside down. They have no idea what to expect. So it's going to be a rough start, but creating that predictability and security is really going to help. This helps them thrive because they know what to expect. So using those visual schedules and timers to kind of reinforce those routines. Now, again, I know middle school, just secondary in general, is a little bit more difficult because students are moving. All right, let's talk about some real life examples. So I once worked with a student, let's call him Johnny, who struggled with staying seated during group time. Every time we were in a group, he would move or jump around the room. We did set up a token economy where he had to earn a token, a dinosaur token. Every 5 minutes, he stayed in his seat. Once he earned those 5 tokens, he could trade them in for a 5-minute break to ride this bike that he loved around the hallways. Again, he was a first grader, so we allowed this, and it was in a self-contained setting. But within weeks, we saw significant improvement in his ability to stay seated and participating because of those tokens. So he really enjoyed playing with the timer, setting his own 5-minute timer. Every time he got, it would ding. I would say, good job staying in your seat for 5 whole minutes. You get a token. And after those 5 tokens, he could go for a 5-minute bike ride, which he loved. However, it's not going to work if the reinforcer isn't high enough. So let's just say it was a gummy and he really didn't like gummies. Johnny is not going to sit in his seat during group time if he really doesn't care about whatever you're reinforcing with. Another example is, let's call her Sarah. Again, she found transitions super overwhelming, and we introduced a first then board and used her favorite Disney princess stickers as reinforcements, and she loved this. So the simple structure and reinforcement really transformed her experiences with those transitions. So let me think. Another student that we had, let's call her, Mia, who had difficulty following multi-step directions. Like she had those one-step directions down. So we introduced like a visual, little checklist for every task. Mia was a reader, so every time she would do a task, she would check it off in her little checkbox, which she loved. She thought she was so cool. And she had the tiniest little clipboard. And this tool reduced her frustration and really increased her independence. So let's talk about some things that might come up as a challenge. Not every tool is going to work perfectly the first time or really ever, right? It's a check and guess or a guess and check. You're going to try it, and if it works, great. Or keep trying, and if it still doesn't work, great. Let's change it up, right? So you want to be able to reflect what's working and what's not working every single time you use something. And I'm going to say it. You have to start data collecting this. So say you tried the token board and the 5 tokens did not work. You don't just throw the token board in the trash. You might say, shoot, this is not working. I knew this wasn't going to work. Let's try 3 tokens. Let's see if Johnny can earn 3 tokens. But let's say you wrote on your data sheet, nope, 5 tokens didn't work. 3 tokens didn't work. I hate this. I'm not using token economy. That's okay. It's okay. If you don't want to try that, throw it away. Try something else. However, try 1 token. See if the student can just get 1. If 1 doesn't work, then switch up your tactic. Another thing you can try is collaborate with your team to brainstorm alternative approaches. It is never too late to kind of reach out to your team and say, hey, I've tried A, B, and C with Johnny, and I'm just stuck. Also, you can just always adjust the rewards or the visuals or the schedules or the reinforcers, or maybe you have a bin of something. Little tweaks like that might help troubleshoot any challenges you might have. Behavior management doesn't have to be overwhelming, but using tools like behavior-specific praise, token economies, visual supports, you can create a classroom environment where both you and the students thrive. Remember, it takes time, so celebrate every small step forward. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you took just one little tidbit from this, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. See you next week, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, taskboxing, and inspiring.